Alright, so now that the Callisto protocol has been out for about 8 days, 9 days now, I do want to kind of lay out my thoughts on the game as a whole, go into the story a little bit, and then the general kind of gameplay and stuff they could improve over time and through DLC. I've played the game through about 3 times now in different ways, and I do kind of want to lay everything out there. Although it has been a week, I will not be showing any of the end game footage, like nothing from the last half of the game. All the footage in the video is from the first half of the game. But with that, I will be talking about the ending. Well, not the ending, but more the overall story. So I guess, yeah, spoilers will be involved in the video. If you don't want to see anything or hear anything to do with the end of the game and the story of the game, click off the video. But without further ado, let's just jump into it. Alright, so the story, to be honest, the story is very generic for the genre. So survival horror genre, you know, you've got this big shady company that's doing something not exactly right, but at the same time you're not aware of that until like the last half of the game, and that is very much, you know, the case for this game. So basically the UJC, who are in charge of the prison, are using the prison as a testing ground for the parasite that they found. So essentially they were using the prisoners within Black Iron to test this parasite. They would infect them with it and see if they would like respond to it well, because they were under the idea that it would bond with a host and it would be like the perfect next step in evolution. That line is actually said in the game. It's said in everything, I think, but essentially that's the story. It's very generic and it's nothing new. That being said, I do like that story, like that kind of storyline where a big shady company is doing something not exactly right for their own reasons, and I do kind of, I understand why it's not the best part of the game, because let's be honest, it's been in every horror game, Resident Evil from the early ones. You know, you've got the zombie outbreak and Umbrella being involved, and it's very similar to that. So yeah, the story we have in the game, not the best, not the most like unique, but it is still enjoyable. Like, I would say if you like that kind of storyline, it's probably going to tick a box for you there. In terms of ways they could have improved the storytelling in the game, I think you need to flesh out the characters a lot more. I think Jacob and Danny, they kind of had a brief rundown on who they were and what they were doing, but there were so many things they could have gone into, but they just didn't. But with that, there is a story DLC coming out, I believe in the spring of next year, so maybe that will be a chance for them to flesh out more of the overall story of the world they're building or the characters themselves, because there's a lot of ways they could go with the DLC based on the ending of the game. But yeah, that's pretty much the kind of the basis of the story and what I really want to say about it. So now we'll go on to the actual gameplay, and first we'll start with the combat. This is a interesting one. I think a lot of people have a mixed opinion on this one. So the game itself, it does encourage a lot of melee combat, and to be honest, it is good. The melee combat does feel nice, and it does take some getting used to. The dodge mechanic could do with some work. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. Sometimes you definitely dodge and it doesn't matter because you're getting slapped in the back by something else. And it is a good system. It does play quite well for the most part, but it is also quite clunky. So maybe in a future installment or in the DLC, if they're going to change it in some way, make it so that you can kind of deal with more than one enemy at once. Because it kind of feels to me that the melee combat, specifically the melee combat, kind of wants to make you fight things one-on-one. And when you get hoarded by stuff, especially on hardest difficulty, which I will be talking about in a minute, it can be a bit stressful. Everything else, the weapon play, the guns feel fine. Some of them are a bit underwhelming for what they are, but for the most part, the weapons feel quite good. And then the grip, which is the kind of like the glove, also very good. And it does help a lot in the combat sections of the game where you have a lot of enemies, because a lot of the arenas you get put into do have those environment opportunities in them for a reason. Use them. So it definitely does help out. We're dealing with a bunch of enemies at once. So difficulty is another thing that's been spoken about quite a lot, with a lot of different opinions online. A lot of people saying it's a little bit too hard, and I want to say I don't really agree with it. I do in some parts of the game, but for the most part I don't really agree with it. Just to throw my own like kind of experience out there, I started the game on maximum security first time through and finished it without changing difficulty once. I will say the first hour, maybe 2 of the game is quite difficult, but as soon as you've got a couple guns and the glove, it does kind of diminish in the difficulty area. Like, it does get a lot more manageable. Granted, there are certain areas of the game that are difficult on hard difficulty. Again, in that first hour of the game, I believe there's an encounter right before you get the first gun where you just have the baton, but there's like 4 enemies in a room, and that took me a few tries, mainly because I wasn't really used to the dodge and the melee yet, but it took me a few tries to get through. A couple of the boss fights are a bit of a joke as well, especially on the first time you get to them, because you don't know what they do. They can pretty much one-shot you. But like I said earlier in the video about like using the environment, using the things around you, it really does make it easy when you can just slam every enemy into a spike wall and be killed them in one shot, regardless of difficulty. Personally speaking, I don't think it was that hard of a game. I know there is 2 extra difficulties coming out. There's a hardcore mode coming out in February, and then a permadeath mode coming out as one of the DLC packs later down the line. I'm not sure what they'll do, but I'm sure they'll actually make the game a lot harder than what it is. But personally speaking, I didn't find maximum security that difficult, and I'd always encourage people to play it on that difficulty first, because, you know, it's not impossible, and it does take a bit of time to get through some parts of the game, but it is worth it. Alright, so horror-wise and scariness-wise, I will say this is one of my 1 complaints with the game. It is not scary at all. It is not a scary game in the least. Which was honestly a bit of a shame. The environment itself, the atmosphere is very, very good, and that does add a level of fear to the game, but in terms of general scariness, it's really not. There's a couple of jump scares they throw in there every now and again, kind of predictable, apart from like 1 or 2, and one of them did get me, but other than that, apart from jump scares, there's nothing really kind of scary about it. Again, something they could improve on with the DLC, and with a potential sequel as well, given the ending, but for now, it was more atmospheric than in-your-face scary. And last thing I want to mention, this is a big one for me with survival horror games and games of the type, is replayability. And to be honest, this game doesn't have a lot on the surface of things. Now obviously you can do your own kind of replays, like doing it in a fastest time, doing it on highest difficulty, doing it with restrictions on what you're going to do. And I do have plans to do that myself in the future, but in terms of achievements and stuff like that, there isn't really anything. Like, you can, if you really played the game and paid attention, you could platinum the game and 100% the game in 1 run. When I finished my first run of the game, I had 2 achievements left, and I went in, played through the game again on easy, and did it. And I could have done it all in 1, but I just missed a couple things. So it doesn't really have a lot of replayability at the moment. I do plan on doing my own things with it at the moment. One thing I have in mind is going through it with just a baton and see if that's actually possible. I might stream it, I might do it as a video, I'm undecided. And there's a couple of things I want to try as well, maybe a permadeath run, in practice for the actual permadeath run, that'd be fun to do, but given you can't skip cutscenes in this game, it takes a while to get through anyway. But yeah, with the DLC being added, I'm sure they'll add more replayability to it. Again, they're adding a kind of survival mode to the game, they're adding a permadeath mode to the game, and it's got a story DLC, so there will be a lot more to do over time, but as it is right now, there's not an awful lot to do unless you really stretch your mind to doing something a bit more unique. But that's pretty much going to cover my initial thoughts on the game. Overall, I did have a lot of fun playing it through, especially the first time around. It does give a lot of Dead Space vibes, and that's obviously a given, considering it was made by like half the people who made that game originally. I also do want to mention the performance issues the game apparently had, more so on PC than anything else. I was playing on the PS5, it didn't have an issue once, but on PC I have heard and seen that it did not work as well as it should have at launch, and hopefully that's resolved now. But yeah, other than maybe a couple frame drops every now and again, nothing too bad. The performance was fine on the PS5 on performance mode. But yeah, that's pretty much my overall thoughts on the Callisto Protocol. I will be obviously checking out the DLC as and when it all launches, and I will be doing maybe a couple more videos on it as well, more going in depth about the hardest difficulty, and then maybe doing some certain challenge runs I have in mind. But yeah, the game's good. If you do like survival horror games, definitely give it a go. Because while the story isn't the most original thing ever, and it is very, very similar to other games, the game itself and the gameplay is a lot of fun. But yeah, here's hoping the DLC is good as well, and maybe if they want to do a sequel, that'd be good too, because again, with the ending, if you've seen it or kind of played the ending by now, you'll know that it does leave a lot of things open to a DLC that continues the story or a sequel, so we'll never know. But yeah, leave your thoughts on the Callisto Protocol down below. Thank you all for coming by, and I'll catch you all in the next one.